The consequences of cheating on your wife! You asshole! His wife's fervent declaration reached his ears the moment he entered the bedroom. Soon after they had met, Raymond had gotten a good look at Dorothy's explosive reactions. It was at a highly recommended restaurant. They were on their second date when Dorothy's food arrived, and she quickly discovered that the meat was not cooked to her order. The exchange with the waitress who brought them their food and was about to return Dorothy's dish to the kitchen in exchange for another was going well until an arrogant waiter intervened, stating that they would have to be charged for the extra dish. It was then that Dorothy spoke out to the waiter, very loudly and in clearly unladylike terms. Eventually, the maitre d' asked them to leave, but not before they experienced the satisfaction of learning that the waiter had been dismissed. This was Raymond's first experience with Dorothy's emotional volcanic eruptions. Although several other such incidents had occurred since their wedding day, very few had been directed at him in the past 23 years. This was one such incident. "Modoc, get in the living room at once!" squealed Dorothy, turning to Raymond. He hadn't heard her enter the house. Besides, he thought she'd come later. Sighing loudly, Raymond considered for a moment simply ignoring his wife. However, that would only delay the confrontation for a short while. It was better to simply reach for whatever her panties were twisted with as quickly as possible. That way, equilibrium would be restored much more quickly. Turning around, he walked quickly down the wood-paneled hallway into the carpeted living room, his footsteps echoing strangely in the silence. The living room always reminded Raymond of an austere doctor's office. The living room was decorated with modern furniture that Dorothy had chosen from a popular Swedish furniture store. The eclectic simplicity of the room's layout seemed out of place in the house, but Dorothy liked it, so Raymond accepted it. "What's the matter, Dorothy?" Ray asked in a calm but prim tone. He was anything but calm, and in fact had come to resent Dorothy's humiliating attitude. It was becoming increasingly difficult to cope with her angry denunciations. "Don't you dare pretend to be innocent, you asshole," said Dorothy with righteous anger. "Timothy told me some sensational news about you." Raymond had noticed Timothy Hannity as he entered the living room, but he had never liked the man, and now he didn't even like him, so he didn't bother to pay attention to him. "I see," Raymond remarked carelessly. Then, letting the moment linger in tense silence, he asked, "So what's this scoop?" studiously ignoring Hannity. "You know what?" began Dorothy, her rage renewed, but she was interrupted by Raymond, louder and more ardent than she had ever imagined. "Shut up!" Dorothy's face turned purple, though it reflected the shock of her husband's unprecedented outburst of anger. "What?" she began to demand loudly. "Shut up!" shouted Raymond again. Then more calmly, "I said shut up, and I meant shut up. Do you understand? Don't say a word. Just nod if you understand." Glancing at Timothy, who also seemed to be in a state of shock, Dorothy could not and would not let this challenge to her authority go unanswered, especially in front of Timothy. "How dare you? I must—" "Shut up!" Raymond shouted, saliva flying from his mouth. "Just shut up!" The anger inside him burst out, causing his words to become more guttural than he intended. Dorothy could tell that Raymond was angry, maybe even enraged, by the way his chest heaved. "If you can't talk normally without calling me names, then go away and don't come back, Dorothy," Raymond said without his previous bile. "Otherwise, explain yourself." Even though her face was burning with embarrassment and stained with anger, Dorothy managed to curb her hoarseness and lower her volume. She had never experienced her husband's anger on this scale, and it bothered her to the point where she felt that caution was probably the best course of action. "Well, if you heard what Timothy just said, you'd be upset too." She irritably blurted it out to her husband, bestowing Timothy with a strained smile. Without taking his gaze off her and thus refusing to look at Timothy, Raymond asked Dorothy, "What, pray tell, did you hear that upset you so much, dear wife?" Although no malice was visible in him, he spoke the words rather harshly. In spite of the tense atmosphere, Dorothy rushed forward. "He said he saw you with a blonde-haired woman." Frowning his eyebrows, Raymond gestured for her to continue. "Many people saw the two of you having a very friendly dinner together." After a moment's silence, during which Dorothy seemed to enjoy her husband's seeming discomfort, Raymond asked discreetly, "Good. What else?" Feeling her husband's position shaken, Dorothy pounced. "Tim saw you entering the motel room with that woman." She stated it almost triumphantly. "So, is it true?" Nodding his head slowly, Raymond answered obediently, "Yes, it's all true." His gaze flickered to Timothy for a moment, and he saw that worthless asshole smirking contentedly. "Aha! Asshole! I got you!" Dorothy started loudly in her righteous indignation. "Get out of here!" Raymond thunderously continued. "I meant it when I told you to leave if you were going to start yelling and swearing, so get the hell out of here." Just at that moment, the doorbell rang. Cheerful bells tinkled melodiously in the cold silence. "I think it's for you," Raymond explained cryptically. An expression of confusion mixed with uncertainty appeared on Dorothy's and Timothy's faces at the sight of Raymond's mysterious behavior. Then the doorbell rang again. "Well, one of you out to open it?" Raymond advised cheerfully. A slight smile played on his lips. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Dorothy began irritably, turning toward the hallway to open the door. Timothy had a concerned look of fear in his eyes as he stared at Dorothy's back as she opened the door. A short, plump woman, who looked both haggard and angry, practically burst into the room. She squeezed past Dorothy, who froze with her mouth open. Stopping abruptly in the center of the living room, she waved a folder in front of her and addressed Raymond directly. "Is this true?" Nodding sadly, Raymond said softly, "I'm afraid it is. It's all been verified by a conscientious investigator, Mrs. Hannity. And let me add that I sincerely apologize for meeting you in this way." Frowning angrily, Vera Hannity replied, "No, it is I who apologize for having to meet you in this way." Then she turned to face her husband, the now shrinking Timothy. Extending her arm and pointing an unbending finger at him, she ordered, "Get your ass home right now. We're having a come-to-Jesus meeting, and you're definitely not going to like it. Now get moving." The smirk long since wiped off his face, he stared at the floor without looking at his wife. "Yes, darling. I can explain." "Don't you dare call me darling. And you'll explain everything. A whole bunch of things. Now get out." Slumping his shoulders, Timothy Hannity walked shufflingly out the door, not daring to look at Dorothy. Faith Hannity followed him, but stopped beside Dorothy and, looking at her contemptuously, spat out sharply, "Traitor!" Dorothy slowly closed the front door, pondering what had just happened. How had things taken such an awkward turn? Her husband. He had done it. "You asshole! You're the one who tricked me. You even admitted it. I'm going to take everything you have and hold dear. You're just—" "I've never admitted to anything inappropriate. What I did admit to was being seen with a blonde woman when we had lunch and when I walked her to her motel room. But you see, Dorothy, she's not just any woman. She's a private detective I hired in Atlanta. She's been following you and Timothy sporadically for 2 months. During that time, she's gotten a lot of evidence. When we met, it was so she could give me what she had gathered. And to explain something, you see, her husband is a lawyer and, by the way, my divorce attorney. By the time Timothy followed me, we had already completed our investigation. When he saw me at the motel, I was going to see her husband who had accompanied her here. So what did I care if your Timothy saw me with her?" He heard a sigh of pain escape Dorothy's mouth as he explained the situation surprisingly calmly. "Now, as far as you are concerned, the house will remain mine, as I had full ownership of it before I even met you. We're both keeping our respective 401s. The savings and current accounts have been largely depleted to pay the monthly bills, our daughter's college tuition, and don't forget, private investigator services. These people don't come cheap. After a little thought, he added, and also my lawyer. Of course, I had to pay him. He looked at his wife and saw that her face was contorted with an unpleasant grimace as if she was in pain. Oh, don't worry. I haven't left you completely destitute. There's enough money in your current account to pay for a divorce lawyer and even your rent. Her grimace turned into a flowing river, and then her face took on an ugly expression as she began to wail. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Please, Raymond, I didn't mean anything by it. Please, I'm sorry. I'll change. I promise. I will. I really will. Please, oh, please. Snot dripped from my nose and heartbreak filled my eyes with a relentless stream of tears. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm begging you to forgive me. Unaffected by her seeming remorse, Raymond spoke loudly, overlapping her sorrowful cries. If you and Timothy had just come home as usual a little later, everything would have been in place. But since we arrived early, it threw us off schedule. Anyway, your suitcases are ready and packed. They're in the hall closet, the furniture. After a quick look around, Raymond continued. You can keep the furniture. I never liked it. But since you liked it, I'm okay with it. So yeah, take it all. Anything you want. I'm going to renovate all the rooms. What had sustained Dorothy for so many years finally failed her, the wailing growing louder and more desperate as her soon-to-be ex-husband calmly explained the division of their property. It was as if he didn't care. The fact that he admitted he'd never liked the furniture hurt her more than finding out he'd cheated. Then the doorbell rang again. It's probably for you, so you'd better open it, Raymond said in a satisfied tone, pulling the suitcases out of the closet. Sobbing loudly, with her face smeared with snot and tears, she automatically opened the door. The tall gentleman seemed surprised to see her in such a mess, but without wasting a second, he asked, Are you Dorothy Stevens? In response to her slight nod, he asked in a neutral voice for identification. What's the matter? Dorothy asked pitifully. Fear turned into a growing knot in her stomach as she guessed the man's intentions. Please, Mrs. Stevens, will you show me your ID? The man asked again, more sternly. With a curt nod, Dorothy went to her purse, quickly pulled out her driver's license, and grabbed some tissues in an attempt to wipe her face. Walking back to the door, Dorothy, with a trembling hand, held out her license to the patiently waiting man. After carefully examining the driver's license and comparing the photo with the sheet of paper he held in his hands, the man nodded in satisfaction, then handed her a folded package of papers in a blue envelope and concluded his speech by saying, You have been served. Thank you for your cooperation. Have a good day. Then, before Dorothy could react, he quickly snapped a picture of her with the papers on his cell phone. With a sudden numbness that reached her toes, she watched the man walk away quickly, get into his car, and drive away. She stopped crying and stood dumbly in the doorway, speechless, swaying, emotionless, and devastated, waiting wordlessly for what would happen. A few seconds later, her sister Chris pulled up, along with their mother. They parked along the curb, but on the street both got out and ran up to her. Are you okay, Dottie? Chris asked anxiously. What's wrong, honey? Mom asked, with what appeared to Ray to be feigned concern. Her older daughter just stood there, unresponsive. Dorothy opened her mouth and moved her jaw up and down, but the only thing that came out was a quiet moan of pain. Turning to her son-in-law, Eva demanded an explanation. What did you do to my daughter? Shrugging, Raymond bent down to pick up one of Dorothy's suitcases, saying calmly, I did nothing. She did it all on her own. An angry grimace appeared on Eve's face at his reply. Stop puzzling. What do you mean by that? Walking over to his crying wife and looking over her shoulder at his mother-in-law, he said, She doesn't like the consequences of her adultery. One of those consequences was that I filed for divorce. It's actually very simple. Before anyone could respond, he continued. Now, If you would be so kind as to help Dorothy carry her clothes and suitcases to the car, she's really going to need all of this on a daily basis. That's why I asked you both to come here to help Dorothy. She can come back and pack the rest of her things. I'll even let her store all that junk in the garage until she gets a closet, I think. Chris, noticing her sister's state of mind, looked at her mother puzzled. "Dottie, is it true?" she asked, with a note of doubt in her voice. Dorothy, with her eyes sunken and lost, could only nod through her sobs, her voice leaving her in her distress. Ava, though not known for her gentleness, took her daughter in her arms, a clear sign of support despite the mistake she had made. "You're coming with us, Dottie. You can stay in your old room for now." "But, Mom, this scandal," Chris started to say, but was stopped by Eva's stern look. "There won't be a scandal, Christina. No more than what's already happened. Family takes care of family. We'll deal with the rest later," Eva said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. Raymond watched the scene with a heavy heart, but his decision was adamant. He had played the role of understanding partner for too long, and Dorothy's betrayal was the last straw. As Eve and Chris helped the broken Dorothy into the car, Raymond stepped forward. "Dorothy," he called softly. She turned toward him, her eyes filled with confusion, pain, and a plea for something she couldn't understand. "I hope you find what you're looking for. Something you couldn't find in our marriage. I truly wish that for you." There was a finality in his voice that spoke of a closed chapter and burned bridges. With those words, he turned and walked back into the house, quietly closing the door behind him. The sound was like an echo of the end of their long years together, resonating with quiet excitement and sadness for a love that apparently never happened. In a house that had now become all too quiet, Raymond stood alone in the middle of the living room. He looked around at the furniture Dorothy had chosen and the furnishings she loved, all reminiscent of a past life and of a woman he no longer knew. He realized it was time to start over, for both of them. Taking a deep breath, he reached for the phone and dialed a number. "Hello, yes? Is this the Furniture Donation Center? I have some stuff to give away." "Yes, quite a lot. It's time for a change. The end."